Good afternoon. Welcome to our Thursday live. Something exciting is on the cards. We have been trailing myself and Crystal all over the show. I'm actually not at home at this point, but I'm visiting their lovely new house, and due to the fact that we were on the road this entire week, we built a studio in a new house in 45 minutes, and we're here in time. Welcome to our Thursday live. Sit back, relax. We are going to show you tips and tricks on how to paint furniture and just inspire and give useful information, something that you can use at home when you are upcycling furniture. And with Tjhoko paint, this is something that we are doing all the time and encouraging. Not throw away, but to upcycle, reuse, repurpose. Today we are going to work on a piece of furniture. We have started the process so that you can see the end result by the end of this session. It is raw wood, but something that we realized when we started cleaning with Lacquer Thinners was that this furniture piece was completely filled with oil. And the most important tip is to do the cleaning process properly. Take care when you clean. So I dipped a cloth in thinners. It was soaking wet with thinners, and we washed off more than once to make sure that all the oily residue on the surface was removed completely. I'll share later how to treat bleeding if that happens. We thought this might happen, and we did get some glaze close by, but we didn't have to use it. But I'll share bleeding problems with you afterwards. Okay, something that we did next after the cleaning process was done properly is we masked off the areas where we didn't want to paint or didn't want any paint to get onto. So this we want to leave raw wood just to fit this farmhouse look and feel we are working on. And the color we are going to work with today is Super Sonette, purely because Sonette is a superhuman, filled with creativity and doesn't care to share inspiration, and we as the Tjhoko family just love it dearly. This is the color I'm going to work with, and while I'm painting, I'm actually going to give tips on how to work on various surfaces, whether it's a textured timber surface like this is, and when you're working on a smooth surface, the process will differ. Okay, on a timber surface like this, you can see there's a lot of detail on the wood. It's not a smoothly varnished surface. So what I'm going to do is dip my Tjhoko Ensign brush, 50mm, in my paint. No undercoat is required, and I simply paint onto the wood. So you can see generous amount of paint evenly spread it onto the surface. And painting is therapy. I had Anne-Marie in the Tjhoko paint workshop on Saturday, and she said her friend Tersha dragged her there. She hates painting, and I said, Anne-Marie, after this session, I promise you, you will love painting. And that was exactly the case. With Tjhoko, everything is easy, and we love to inspire. So this is the process that I will follow on this textured timber surface. Also important, after your first coat, allow to dry, and only then start applying your second coat. Drying time of paint vary according to temperatures. So if it's a cloudy, humid day, a longer drying time will be needed. If it's a hot day, shorter drying times are required. I just want to see that I fill in all the gaps. Tip, when painting onto wood, work with the grain of the wood. You can see the grain lines move up and down, and I'm working with my paintbrush in that direction. When working on a smooth varnished surface, just pretend with me that this was now a smooth varnished surface, the leg of a chair. I would do the following. I would work with both a paintbrush and a foam roller. 110mm foam roller, dry, no paint added to it, it hasn't been wet as well. And what I do next is I decant my paint into my paint tray. This is actually a tip that I want to share. Dirty surfaces, you don't know whether or not there's mold growing on this surface. And now, if I dip my paintbrush continuously back into my paint, this might contaminate my paint. So tip is to always, when we give advice, is to pour out your paint, just little at a time, do not waste. Put back the lid, because air can also contaminate your paint, so that no air contamination can happen. And then you work from there until it's finished and you do decant more. And you don't have dirty equipment. You don't know what's growing on this surface, although you've cleaned it. That can also contaminate your paint. I'm going to work from my paint tray. I'm going to paint with my brush. And just to repeat myself, we are pretending now that this is a smoothly varnished surface. And how to get a very smooth, even finish. That was a question I received earlier this week, so I do want to show it. So I paint with my paintbrush on my leg of my now pretending smooth varnished surface. I make sure I cover nicely, spread the paint evenly, no blocks of paint sitting anywhere. And while my paint is still wet, I take my dry foam roller, press very evenly, and on a smooth surface, this will now create a very smooth, even finish. This is a nice tip for furniture pieces that's medium in size, not big, flat surfaces, medium, the legs of a furniture piece. Lovely tip to get a very even, smooth finish. Larger flat surfaces. Look at my friend joining me for this live session. Hello, baby. Hi, why isn't? There's a mohair roller. So larger flat surfaces. Mohair roller works like a charm. Think of those built-in cupboard doors. You don't need to prime with Tjhoko. Clean properly with Lacquer Thinners and ensure that the varnish is older than 6 months before you can paint with anything onto it. And then you roll your paint onto those surfaces. Okay, I'm going to move to my next leg that has been painted and that has dried. And now to create that subtle farmhouse look, I'm going to use 100 grit piece of sandpaper. I actually keep it in its rolled up form. As the sandpaper gets dirty, you tear off, you hold onto this, it's not hard on your hands. And what I do is at an angle, I'm going to sand to subtly distress my furniture piece. And what I'm also going to do for the next step is I'm going to sand. My wood has lovely texture, and I do want to emphasize the texture on my wooden surface. I'm just going to use a flat piece of wood, flat piece of sandpaper. It's been a very long week. We've driven, I think, 6,000 kilometers, eh, Crystal?
Pretty much.
If I feel that anything is maybe distressed too much, I can take my paintbrush and lightly brush over it, just to hide anything that I feel might be too much. So play around.
Staan gou by die kant vir die lig, asseblief.
I'm just changing light. The moment you sand, you will see a different dimension on your surface. I don't know if it's visible on the camera, but you can see more paler versions of the color. So to describe Sonette, it is a neutral with a tinge of green in it. Next, I'm going to apply a dry brush technique on this section here at the bottom. Now for a dry brush technique, it is exactly as the technique describes. You are going to work with a dry brush. So what I'm going to do, my paintbrush that I've used earlier, on an old piece of rag, I'm going to remove excess paint. And I'm simply going to brush. There you can see my brush is too wet. How will I fix that? Once it's dry, you take your sandpaper and you lightly sand there. Because a dry brush technique is like a sanding, a fake sanding technique where you actually use very little paint, very little effort to create a sanded finish.
I call it the lazy girl sand.
The Crystal calls it the lazy girl sand. That's a lovely way of describing it, Crystal. The drier your brush, the safer. You can rather apply another coat later again than having too much paint on your surface and then have to sand, because then it's no longer a lazy girl technique. So this will just subtly change the color of the wood, but it will also match the raw timber surface that I want to keep at the top. And I'm just brushing. You won't even see that, but I'm seeing it now, just to make sure everything is done neatly and properly. I also like, when I do a dry brush technique, to sometimes just change direction, and then you emphasize different textures on your wood or surface again. And you stop the moment you feel the color is perfect. You can also apply dry brush technique maybe with a white. It won't be that visible for the live. On top of your Super Sonette to just create that two-toned effect. Okay, Tjhoko has a built-in sealant. And for the purpose of this bench, in Crystal's new house, I'm not going to apply a glaze. The only time that I would apply a glaze, and this is now the tip that I said I will mention in the beginning of the session, if bleeding happens. Now, bleeding is when excessive oil in your surface bleeds through the paint, and you never know when it's going to happen. So once you start painting, even though you have cleaned thoroughly, it still can happen sometimes. You will see yellow blotches coming through your paint, and what we then do is we wait for that paint coat to dry properly, given an hour to 4 hours. Paint undiluted clear glaze onto that surface and areas. And what I do, if it's excessive bleeding, you can really see the yellow coming through. I apply 3 coats of that undiluted glaze. You still use very little product. Wait an hour between coats and then wait 24 hours. And then just paint on top of the glaze again. The glaze will act as a barrier. We also use the glaze kitchens, bathrooms, outdoors to make the surface water and UV resistant, and it's also a spot treatment for bleeding problems. My message, we will style this and we will share a beautiful pic with you in the David's new beautiful home after the session. My message for this week is endlessly. Love endlessly, live endlessly, create endlessly. Use the opportunities that come your way endlessly, and also create endless opportunities for yourself. Just enjoy life endlessly. Have a lovely time till we meet each other again, and loads of love from the entire family, from Joburg this time. Bye.